Well, enough build-up already. Let's cut to the chase, let's get to the point. I want to show you now some of the most blatantly obvious, notorious examples of recent abuses of power on behalf of our mass media, of our mainstream media. So here we go. The first one, I'm sure many of you will remember, not long ago, the great anchor Brian Williams had quite a scandal, quite a gaffe, and he is now known for misremembering a little helicopter ride that he had. The story goes on to say, the truth, Mr. Williams now says, is that he was actually aboard a helicopter that arrived on scene perhaps an hour after a separate Chinook helicopter had been damaged by enemy fire and forced to land. He inspected the damaged chopper, but he had not been riding in it. I made a mistake in recalling the events of 12 years ago. It did not take long to hear from some brave men and women in the air crews who were also in that desert. I want to apologize. So here we have the #1 news anchor for his station, NBC, and he got caught in a huge lie. Here's a front page New York Post line: Brian War scandal engulfs NBC. His Iraqi pilot shoots down the tail. He's got a nose for news. But one does not simply misremember being hit by an RPG, which was his original story. It's quite amazing when you think about it, but hey, rather than misremembering, I'm wondering if he was coerced, encouraged by maybe someone from the Bush-Cheney group, the Bush-Cheney gang, that is known for misremembering about weapons of mass destruction, to the tune of making $39.5 billion from the Iraq War through Cheney's Halliburton. I wonder if our friend here, Brian Williams, ended up seeing any of that rather nice chunk of change. Now, yeah, that's probably going a bit far. I don't have any evidence on that. But the most preposterous thing about his story is that he told it repeatedly over a span of 12 years. At the very least, I'm sure every time he told this emotional tale, Bush and Cheney had quite the grin. While we're picking on NBC, let me go ahead and bring up the George Zimmerman Trayvon Martin case. Now, let me throw out this disclaimer. I am in no means trying to influence you to believe that Zimmerman was guilty or not guilty, a racist or not a racist. He may very well have been, he may very well be. That is not my point. My point here is to show you the blatantly abusive power that NBC evoked when they edited to a crazy extent the call between a 9/11 responder and George Zimmerman. Let's go ahead and see what they did. It's obvious that they're content with starting riots, inciting violence, if it means ratings will go up because of a hotbed issue or because of a story. So here we go. Zimmerman, we were told originally, Zimmerman said, "This guy looks like he's up to no good. He looks black." In reality, here's the actual exchange between the responder and Zimmerman. "This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining and he's just walking around looking about." Okay, and this guy, is he black, white, or Hispanic? So there you go. He's been asked a question. He looks black. But all we got originally was this top line, which definitely makes him look racist. And again, I'm not saying he isn't. He may very well be based on other evidence cited elsewhere. But right here we have, again, a textbook example of the media throwing caution to the wind, throwing truth to the wind, losing all credibility. In my opinion, whoever edited this story and approved it should be kicked out of media for life. This is ridiculous. They started violence, they started riots, all because they wanted higher ratings. But the publishing shenanigans don't stop there. Let's take the field of medicine, for example. Did you know that in the last couple of years, two of the most highly respected medical journals on the planet, The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, have been severely discredited by admissions from their own editors-in-chief? Here we go, this article from the Washington'sBlog.com site. We see that the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, Richard Horton, wrote last month, this is from 2015, Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue, afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance. Science has taken a turn towards darkness. As one participant put it, poor methods get results. The Academy of Medical Sciences, Medical Research Council, and Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council have now put their reputational weight behind an investigation into these questionable research practices. The apparent endemicity, i.e., the pervasiveness within the scientific culture of bad research behavior, is alarming. In their quest for telling a compelling story, sounds a lot like those NBC folks, scientists too often sculpt data to fit their preferred theory of the world, or they retrofit hypotheses to fit their data. Journal editors deserve their fair share of criticism too. We aid and abet the worst behaviors. Our acquiescence to the impact factor fuels an unhealthy competition to win a place in a select few journals. Our love of significance pollutes the literature with many a statistical fairy tale. We reject important confirmations. He goes on then to talk about lack of credibility in our universities, but I'm going to skip that for now, and we'll finish the medical portion up with this. This is a little bit older, 2009, but again, the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Marcia Angel, I'm not sure if that's how we pronounce her name, in her journal. It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Wow. There you have it, folks. If these, being touted as two of the most reliable, credible medical sources on the planet, are being this scrutinized by their own editors, and they're admitting that there's this much error and conflict of interest and basically rubbish and bogus stories, then my friends, where can the truth be found? Lastly, I'd like to cover the mainstream media's sin of omission. This is going to be sort of a grand finale here as we quickly run through 3 brief stories. I know I'm not going to do them justice, but here we go. The first one. This is from the National Review, January of this year, 2016. Love the opening line. Obama administration scandals never resolved. They just vanish, usually under a new scandal. The title is somewhat misleading. Sure, we captured El Chapo once, I guess twice, and it briefly put Operation Fast and Furious back in the headlines. But just like Benghazi, the IRS scandal, this Fast and Furious scandal, nobody ever seems to really be prosecuted. There's a go through the motions hearing. Obama asks judges to keep documents from Congress. But anyway, getting back to this one, Operation Fast and Furious was supposed to help the ATF dismantle drug cartels. In reality, it ends up putting into the hands of criminals south of the border some 2,000 weapons which have been used to kill hundreds of Mexicans and at least one American, U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. This story never seemed to get the publicity that it was due. Again, we have a case of sweeping things under the rug, forgetting about it, pushing it down the line. Eric Holder, he just needs to resign, and this goes on the back burner. Benghazi, Hillary Clinton, we'll just have her resign, and this will go on the back burner. And it just seems to be a tune that the mainstream media loves to continually play over and over. And usually there's a distraction. In this case, here we have an athlete getting way more attention than Brian Terry. It's unbelievable. If you recall, a few weeks ago, over the holiday weekend, about a month ago, they're in the big news. The big story was Harambe, the 17-year-old rare gorilla from the Cincinnati Zoo. Here's a CNN article. In gorilla's death, critics blame the mother and the Cincinnati Zoo. This story to me is heartbreaking. I have a toddler, and I'm sure any of you who are parents who've had a kid under the age of 5, at some point or moment, many times, if not many times, they've gotten away from you. If if you sneeze, if you drop something, if you're picking up one of their messes, before you know it, they're gone. If a kid is able to get through a barrier in a matter of seconds, then there's probably an issue. And don't get me wrong, I'm saddened that this great gorilla had to die. This is the way it was. But come on, wanting to prosecute the mom, calling her kid a brat. People, where are our priorities? The biggest thing that really chaps my hide about all of this is on that same holiday weekend, Chicago saw 69 people shot. And all the mainstream media wants to talk about is a gorilla. Don't get me wrong, I love animals. I've had birds, dogs, cats, reptiles, rabbits. I love animals, we should respect them. But give me a break. Same weekend, Memorial Day weekend. It says here, the pace of the shootings did hold, and Memorial Day weekend saw 6 people killed and another 63 wounded. All from shootings. But all we're talking about is the gorilla. Alrighty, let's quickly get to that third and final story, and that is the Brexit. I'm sure you've heard about the vote. I think it was 52 to 48%. Britain decided to leave the EU. Many people were saying it's going to be a disaster, it's going to hurt Britain. Let me recommend, by the way, looking up Mike Maloney and his latest video on Brexit. It's very good. But what I want to discuss here is that nobody leading up to this vote was talking about Iceland. I didn't hear anyone talking about it, and here's why. Between 2009 and 2012, Iceland was flirting with the idea of joining the EU. They had started the process, they were in negotiations, and then they decided, you know what, this isn't for us. With the crash of 2008 that flattened just about every country's economy, Iceland was hit as hard, if not harder than most. And the Iceland Prime Minister says in this Politico article here, 2015, we dodged the EU bullet. Iceland's Prime Minister breathes a sigh of relief that his country never joined the EU. I am pretty sure our recovery couldn't have happened if we had been part of the EU. He argues that if his country's application made in the midst of an economic collapse in 2009 had succeeded, then Iceland might have suffered the fate of Greece with its long-running economic collapse, or Ireland, which saw its public debt skyrocket as the government took on the bad debts of the banking sector. We might have even gone the other way and become a bankrupt country. Now, the reason no one's mentioning Iceland is because they kicked out the banksters. Not only that, they jailed them. In America, we have banks and bankers that are too big to jail. In Iceland, they put bankers behind bars. Iceland president, the government bailed out the people and imprisoned the banksters, the opposite of what America and the rest of Europe did. Now, certainly, don't get me wrong, they had, like I said, they suffered some pain, and they actually dipped below the EU and the Euro area average GDP rates for a little bit. But look at this recovery. They're doing better than the European Union, better than the Euro area, and nobody's talking about them. Why? Because the elite and the banksters don't want the rest of us following suit. So, this is one of the last tactics. Obviously, there's more. This is the last tactic I'm covering in this video that the mainstream media likes to do. They omit important things. They omit the elephant in the room. So, I think Britain's probably going to have a little bit of pain right now, but staying in, they would have too. I mean, look at Greece, look at Ireland, look at the pigs. Either you're going to become like them, or if you are one of the better economies, you're going to end up paying for them some way or another. And these leaders of the EU are not elected. You have people making decisions for the rest of your life, how you're going to live your life, and they're not even elected. You have no recourse to call them out, to vote someone else in. So I don't blame them. I think more nations need to follow Iceland's lead. And with that, I'm going to wrap this thing up and head to the conclusion. Alright, so to recap today, we've seen a couple quotes one by a former editor of the New York Times back during the Civil War. We've seen two quotes by the editors-in-chief of both the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine in parts 1 and 2, and all three of them admitted that there is rampant error in not only their particular journal or newspaper, but in their field. So at the very best, we would have to conclude, I believe, that the mainstream media today, as it is suspect at best. Now, am I saying all mainstream media is bad and inaccurate and invalid? No, absolutely not. There's truth there. Uh, Much of the time, I would venture to say probably even most of the time. However, there is rampant error, and half truths are falsehoods. So definitely suspect. Am I saying alternative media, alternative news sources are always good, accurate, trustworthy, reliable? Absolutely not. But to say that you are well informed about what's going on in the world simply because you get information from 6 corporations would be like going to a restaurant in New York or Paris, one restaurant, and then claiming to be well acquainted, well accustomed with culinary traditions around the globe. It's absurd. And we need to have a much broader stroke when it comes to getting information. We need to look outside the US. We need to look outside the mainstream, look outside the 6 corporations, cross-check facts. We have to, we must, because so much of what we're given in the mainstream is just drivel. It's biased. We've seen how they omit important stories. They gravely edit and alter recordings and happenings, and then other times they just outright lie. So quickly, I recommend again, we need a broad stroke brush this when it comes to getting information. Some sources that I look up on a regular basis: SGT report, True News, that's TRU News, True News. Paul Craig Roberts, he's a former assistant economic secretary to Ronald Reagan back in 1981. He has excellent stories, great communicator, very well written his pieces are, and he gives you a different side. Gerald Celente, Peter Schiff, The Victory Report, and then for Pete's sakes, look at some sources outside of the USA. We're only 5% of the world's population. BBC, sometimes I'll even look at RT, Russia Today, Al Jazeera, the BRICS Post. Those are articles that are related to the BRICS alliance, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're going to give you a different perspective, and many times that's what we need. So to wrap this up, the great George Orwell said, "Truth is treason in an empire of lies." My friends, lies are out there all over the place, but we need to be diligent and find truth. It's out there. We need to look for it. Thank you.